Hello, I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. This series of podcasts is aimed at financial planning professionals and also those who are looking to enter the financial planning profession. We will be talking during the podcast about all things Certified Financial Planner certification related, talking to other CFPs around the world, and also we will be dropping in on some new entrants who've just entered the financial planning profession, and we'll be checking up along the way on a regular basis with them to see how they're getting on. I hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. And today we are talking everything to do with gaining your Certified Financial Planner assessment and the CISI Level 7 assessment. And I'm joined by a very special guest, a lady who has passed her CFP on her very first submission. And we are going to talk about her journey, how she got there, and all the ups and downs in between in a minute. But before we start, I'd just like to welcome Hetty Hyde-Durrant, who's a financial planner from Broadway Financial Planning. Hello, Hetty.
Hello, Jackie.
Thank you for joining me today. We have lots to talk about, don't we? And I'm going to congratulate you so many times before the end of this interview, no doubt. But you have done amazingly well, worked so hard to gain your CFP license and pass your CISI Level 7 case study on your very first submission. So many congratulations.
Thank you very much. I was quite surprised.
Well, we're going to get into the detail of all of that in a minute. But at the very start, let's just tell us a little bit about how you got into the financial planning profession.
Okay, so I think it might be best to start where I kind of started my career. So I did economics at university, and after that went into a finance graduate scheme, which essentially put you down the accountancy route, and I realised quite quickly that isn't what I wanted to do. So I did a job for about 10 months and thought, this isn't it. This isn't the one for me. And so without actually knowing what I wanted to do, I applied to do a master's to kind of give myself some more time. And then once I completed that at Bristol University, I applied for a job as a funds analyst, which was in an investment operations team. So that was more fund compliance and daily fund pricing and fund dealing. And although I had a really great team and I was working with great people, I was still missing something. So within the organisation, I moved to investment proposition, which I then started to work with financial advisors. And that's where the entry point for me started, and my little brain started to tick away thinking, I think I could do this. This is something I would enjoy more. So my role there was speaking to advisors, getting their feedback on the proposition, and then working on how to improve that proposition. And it made me think, actually, that's something I would really like to do. So I began my exams from that point, and everything escalated from there, really.
Fantastic. And then did you go straight from there to Broadway?
I did, yes. So what I did was I essentially emailed 4, 5, 6 different advice and planning firms with the line of, I'm thinking about becoming an advisor. Can I come and speak to you for some advice of how to do that, essentially? And that was, if I was speaking to anybody who's thinking about going into the profession, I would always say, do that exercise, because I didn't really understand the difference between advisors and planners and wealth managers and how they all have slightly different roles. So at the time, I just thought there was advisors, basically. And speaking to different firms, and especially Kerry at Broadway Financial Planning, she kind of opened my eyes to financial planning being slightly different. And when I was speaking to different firms, I would ask them what their culture was, what their values were, how they like to work with their clients, if they work in office hours, if all the meetings happen at the office or at clients' homes. So there was a few things that after I'd met with different firms, I realised, that's important to me. That's how I would like to work, and that isn't how I would like to work. And one of those things that signaled to me in a really tangible way of a firm's culture and values is actually how advisors were remunerated, because I realised that showed me where the firm wanted the advisors to put their energy and put their emphasis. And for me, that wasn't on getting lots of new clients. That was on looking after the ones that you've got. And obviously some firms can get that balance absolutely perfect, but I knew what I didn't want was a firm that had a lot of pressure on getting lots of new clients in.
Yes. Chasing that target.
Exactly. That's not how I like to work, and it wasn't the culture that I wanted to work in. So that's definitely something I would recommend people do if they're starting out. And essentially I came and met with Kerry, and after speaking to her, I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. This is the exact type of firm I want to work in. And I was just a bit cheeky and I said, this sounds perfect. Have you got any opportunities? And she said, let me go away and think about it, and came back and said, yes, we have. So then I went through a formal interview process. And that's how I ended up where I am. So after a little trip traveling in between the two jobs, I started here.
Excellent. Wow. And so how long ago was that? So what's your journey been like since then? And how did you come across the Certified Financial Planner?
So I joined in 18 months ago, so October 22, and I joined straight as a trainee financial planner. One of the firms that I spoke to before I joined said that when planners join them, they go through every role essentially. So they are joiners and administrator to the financial planners, then a paraplanner, and then a planner. And I thought for some people that's the ideal route, but for me, I knew that wasn't right. And luckily, Kerry supported the approach that I wanted to take, which was go into the role that you're want to do in the end, and
Yes.
learn how to do that one really well.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And Kerry is a certified financial planner. So and Broadway Financial Planning is an accredited firm. So it just kind of fit that CFP was the next step for me. And I didn't want to get out of the cycle of doing exams. So it might seem a little bit early in my career, perhaps, to be doing CFP. But I thought perhaps if I stopped doing exams, starting again would become quite difficult.
Yes. I think life takes over us at a point, doesn't it? And but now you've had all that time carved out for doing all your study and revision. So it's a natural step on to try and finish off perhaps with the CFP, although that might not be the end of the story. You never know.
Yeah. Well, that was another thing as well, because originally I just kind of default started on the chartered CII route. And when Kerry spoke to me about CFP, I thought, oh, well, the CFP will also means I don't have to do AF5 in the CII route, and I'm here planning the best way to get certified with the CISI and chartered with the CII. And I thought maybe that was a bit ambitious for the short amount of time I was here, but one for the future, I think.
Absolutely. And a huge achievement to pass on your first submission anyway, but to pass having only joined the financial planning profession essentially, just 18 months ago, is testament actually to all of your hard work. But like you said, right at the start of this interview, the culture that is at Broadway and the support that you've had as well, to be able to see you through to gain, to become a certified financial planner in such a short space of time. I'm not sure I know anybody who has done it in such a short space of time, Hetty. So very well done for all of that.
Oh, thank you.
So let's get into some of the nitty gritty, because I know that some of our listeners who are either partway through their level 7 case study en route to becoming a CFP, or we've got quite a few people who are interested in doing it, but actually haven't started the process yet. So when you realised that you wanted to do the CFP and you thought, right, okay, let's roll my sleeves up and get on with it, did you do the level 6? I'm guessing you did the level 6 exam first?
Yes, I did that one first.
Okay. And how did you find that? Did you have a particular approach to studying for that?
I found that one okay. Again, I didn't think I would have passed, and then I did. So perhaps I underestimate myself sometimes. But I ended up passing with distinction. So again, very proud of myself. But it was a tricky exam, especially the middle section where you had to write an essay. And I think that's just because of lack of experience of writing essays, being out of university for nearly 10 years at that point. But no, it was okay. I think if you've done your level 4, it's just putting all the pieces of the jigsaw together as opposed to really learning anything new is what I found.
Yeah. So kind of really just applying the knowledge that you've got, isn't it? Rather than learning lots of new stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So then moving swiftly on to the level 7, did you have a break between getting your level 6 exam and taking the level 7 case study and getting cracking with that? Or just went straight in?
Jumped straight in.
Straight in, both feet.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a theme going on here, isn't there? So you get your case study. Tell us about your approach.
So first of all, I read through it several times. But I guess one step before that, I applied to go on your course, which I would encourage anybody to do, because I think without that, I wouldn't have known how to even go about approaching the case study, really. So the course really just gave me some structure to work towards and some timelines to work towards. Yeah. I say that, I didn't stick to the timelines, Jackie, don't be mad, but I had them there, and it just holds you a little bit accountable. So even if you've not stuck to it, at least you've got that nagging thing in your head saying, I'm a week behind, you need to put in the hours. Yeah, so I read through it a few times, and I ended up having, flip charts stuck to my living room wall. My partner was probably driving him crazy with sticky notes everywhere, and family tree of my case study up on the wall and things like that. But that was a really good reminder that, Hetty, you need to be working, you need to get your head down. It was only only 10 weeks. It goes so quickly.
It does, yeah.
That there's not a lot of time to waste. And there's a few techniques I kind of picked up. So have you ever heard of the Pomodoro technique?
I haven't.
So it's like a studying technique where you study for 25 minutes and then you have a 5-minute break, and you do that cycle 4 times. And once you've done that 4 times, you then have a 20-minute break. Wow. And so I think by then you've been working for, 2.5 hours, but you've, for the most part, had your head down. And in that 5-minute break, you're meant to, get up, move your legs, have a cup of tea. But in that 25 minutes, you are head down, concentrating, no distractions. And that really helped me, because it kind of keeps you on track and stops some of that procrastination that can quite easily happen.
Yes, there are lots of rabbit holes to disappear down during the level 7 case study, isn't there?
Yeah.
You can easily distract yourself for quite a long time going, a little pondering on that one, and then the day's gone.
Exactly. So it's even distracting yourselves on things relevant for the case study, but then actually it's not going to help you get any better. Yeah. It's not going to help you progress your case study. It's just more knowledge that you didn't actually need for the thing you're trying to achieve. So
yes,
but it was tricky, the 10 weeks, and I think I worked out, if it's 200 hours, that's about 5 full-time working weeks that you have to fit into 10 weeks whilst full-time working. Yep. So I was lucky that I had support from my company in study days and things. Yes. But essentially every weekend was blocked out to do it.
And so were there particular areas of the case study that you just thought, I don't like the look of this one, or, how did you approach those bits?
So my case study was really estate planning heavy. And I think when we had our first few chats, I was like, is this all? Because it was when we were doing the retirement planning section. And I was thinking, I feel like it should be harder than this. And some of the hard bits was the Excel parts and, testing that knowledge. But the actual planning part, it wasn't that difficult up to that point for my particular case study. But then when it got onto protection and more so estate planning, which is the area that I just so far in my career had less experience with, I really felt like I was thrown at the deep end and had to do a lot of learning really quickly on that section. So that was the part I found most challenging. But it was useful because it meant I spoke to other advisors for their input, and I spoke to some solicitors and said, can I do this? Is this allowed? My knowledge expanded so much by being challenged in that estate planning section.
Yes. I think sometimes, every case study is different, as we've talked about during our time together, haven't we? That overall it's a level 7, but because of the natural nuances with different case study scenarios and the different people involved, you end up with it being kind of loaded in one direction. And obviously yours was lulling you into a false sense of security before giving that door a good slam in your face.
Exactly. I remember you saying to me, and probably only had 2 weeks to go, Hetty, you are going to need about 15 pages for estate planning. And I was like, oh my days. So, and I did need that many pages, so I had to go back and cut a lot of the previous sections down.
Wow.
And that estate planning section was the longest part. So,
yeah. Well, you overcame all of that. And I think that's, taking on new knowledge. Normally the CFP is an application of the knowledge that you have. So taking on that new knowledge can, it can be obviously quite stressful at the time, give you a massive boost in confidence to know that you're going about it the right way. But if you have to do that, and you imagine if you had to do that in too many sections other than the estate planning section, you could quite easily run yourself out of time, couldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I passed, but I did run out of time. So I haven't told you this, but I was finishing my inheritance tax calculations at 20 to 4 and the submission was 4 o'clock. So this is not advice for other people to follow.
This is how not to do it.
This is how not to do it. But the plan that you put together, aims that you finish it at least a week before. You have time to put it in the drawer for a couple of days or longer if possible. Go back and read it. Perhaps get somebody who isn't in the profession to read it. I didn't really have any time. I didn't have time for any of those things.
Wow.
Or I did have time, but I used it incorrectly. So those last couple of weeks, I was thinking, I'm not going to get this done. There's no chance. But I just spent so many hours, really, really crammed in those last 2 weeks. So it is possible, if you get to that point, it is possible to just keep going, get as much done as you can. And my theory was, if I just get as much down on paper as I can, the feedback will tell me where I've gone wrong.
Yes.
And that was the approach. And then I actually ended up getting to the end and I was like, oh my days, I've done it. And I couldn't believe it. So not the approach to take, but
you did it.
I did it. It's just getting those hours in, I think.
Yes. And do you have a feel for how many hours overall it took you?
Well, I don't know. I really lost track. It's really hard. So at the beginning, I tracked it and I actually planned out, okay, if you work for 2 hours on that day and 8 hours on that day and 3 hours on that day. And I thought, this is never going to get up to 200, which I know is what the CISI say will take. But I think in the end, I probably did get there just because of that last couple of weeks of
the last 2 weeks
it was cramming. Yeah.
Yes. No eating, no sleeping, no talking to anybody else, and definitely no socializing.
My boyfriend was incredible because he just took over everything. We split everything fairly equally anyway, but he just did 100% of everything in the house for those last few weeks. So yeah, it's nice to have that support around you. You definitely need it during that time, whether that be through friends or family, because it is a rough ride.
Yeah, having that support around you, it's not, you think you're doing it or you decide to embark on it, but it has much wider impact on everybody around you than I think most people realise initially, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. I remember my friend sent me something and I just said, I don't have the capacity to, it was something a little bit sad. And I was like, I don't have the capacity for that. She's like, oh, sorry, I forgot. You're in the case study. You're deep in the case study.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, and she was like, I'm sorry, we'll talk about it later. So, they do, your friends really do support you and understand that it's not an easy task. Yeah.
And so I know that you were just saying before we came on air that you had the whole of March blocked out for submission 2. Mm-hmm. Which obviously not needed at all. So what are you going to do with all that time now?
Well, I'm actually really pleased because I'm getting married at the start of May, and the resubmission date I think was the 2nd or 3rd of May for the next one, and I'm getting married on the 5th. So I was like, wow, that's going to be a really busy few months if I'm trying to resubmit and plan the wedding. Wow. So to be honest, I think I'm just going to enjoy the free time, see friends, socialise, and not have to worry.
Wow, yes, and deservedly so, absolutely. Go and make it up to all the people that you've gone, I haven't got the headspace to talk to you today. So.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about, there are plenty of people out there who are thinking about doing the CFP and embarking on that process. Do you think that for you as a person, as a financial planner, it's changed or will change the way that you look at clients, the way that perhaps you think through the questions you ask them, or the way that you create a financial plan?
Yeah, so I think the really, I guess the quick, easy answer to that was the work on assumptions that we did. And I know you're a big fan of assumptions. Mm-hmm. But I now feel so much more confident speaking to clients about why we use different assumptions and being able to say to them, actually, I've looked at this really recently. I've looked at 30 years of data. I'm happy to explain why we do it this way. And having that confidence that you've done that work yourself, rather than it just being, oh, we use 3% for inflation because we do. Well, now I know why we do, and I know why I'm happy with that assumption. And that's really it's just given me quite a lot of confidence in that area. And I actually came back to Kerry and the other guys in their team and said, can we please just agree a house view on growth rate assumptions for different asset classes and different risk approaches and different funds? And we've now got one standardized document between us. That I think that's one of the changes that's happened within the firm. And before it was happening, but just informally, and now we've just made it a little bit more formal. So that's kind of the key one, I would say.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's good to hear.
I think that's the main thing for me. I'm sure there's many others, but that's the one that's tangible.
And I think, it might be that, as you see clients now and, you have more in-depth conversations, that, other people have said that actually helps them with the conversations, broader than assumptions, because you can look at figures and perhaps see things coming towards them, potential issues down the track, a little bit further away than perhaps you did before.
Yes.
So it enables you to have, flag up those kinds of conversations, even if it's things that they have to go away and think about, they can't just answer on the spot, but it kind of helps you give them that little bit of extra breathing space, if you like.
Yeah, it's made me think of something else actually, which was that in my case study, it had said, I really hate paying inheritance tax, was the phrase, or something similar.
Yeah.
Well, if a client said to me, I'd like to do inheritance tax planning, it's made me realize actually there's a couple of things there. Is it you do not want to pay the tax, or is it that you just don't want the tax to come out of your estate? Because then there's different ways of doing it. Is it let's minimize the amount you pay, or we can pay for it using a life insurance policy? And so it's made me realize that objectives aren't black and white. You have to dig into them. You have to understand what's motivating the client to say what they're saying. And that's something that I think I've taken away, especially with the case study. All you had was what they had written down. So you had to take it as it was, or you had to make some assumptions. But in real life, you can go back and ask the client. And so I think I do that more now, rather than taking, the first throwaway comment they might say, which is, oh, I hate inheritance tax. Okay, well, why is it that you don't, and we'll go through it in more detail. And that's something as well that I think I've learned to do better.
Yeah. And that's really interesting, isn't it? How it just makes you look at, what they say very slightly differently to, like you say, to dig a little bit deeper, to get a bit more clarification, so you can truly build a financial plan that reflects, the client's wishes.
Yeah,
that's fascinating stuff. Excellent. So we're nearly out of time, actually, although Hetty, I could talk to you all afternoon. So just thinking about giving advice to those people who are sat on the fence, who might be listening to the podcast and thinking, yes, I know Jackie keeps bullying me, trying to get me to do the CFP sometime in 2024. Do you have any advice to people who are thinking about embarking on that journey?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is do it on a course. I cannot comprehend how you can pass this without a structured approach, or a course. Like, obviously I went on yours, Jackie, but I know that there are others out there, because the information that the CISI give you and the example plan, I think it wouldn't pass itself if that was submitted. So it's not really an ideal example plan. You can't use it as a template. I don't know, would you agree with that, Jackie?
Yeah, I think the plan probably would just about pass, but probably by the skin of its teeth. But I think, it's
not an ideal, is it?
It's not ideal. And I think it's forcing you to go through a different thought process if you were looking at the plan and trying to copy that, rather than going on a course forces you to think things through yourself, doesn't it?
Yes, definitely. And at the start, I was really struggling with not having something to kind of refer to. And actually, I think it was your advice, or somebody else I spoke to, Keith Button, I think, had said, try not to go through the case study, the example plan you've been given in detail, because you need to create your own plan. And that's really important that they're separate. And it's really hard to read a phrase that says your objective is, to pay less inheritance tax, and then not just copy that word for word. You have to come up with your own wording. And it's so important. It gets drilled into you that nothing can be copied. And obviously I wouldn't copy, but it's hard to read one sentence and try and replicate it without copying.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, I would say go on a course, because the other thing is, if you don't pass first time, you obviously have to resubmit, and the cost is the same every time you do it. It's not a lower cost to resubmit. So over the long term, I think you'd end up paying more not going on a course.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then once you've decided that, I would say start early. I think some of my feedback to you of the course, Jackie, was actually, I think you give people a week to do some of the prep work, but I think people could start prepping even earlier than that. And I think things like the assumptions you could start writing even before you've got your case study, because a lot of them will be the same. And actually, there's only a few that are different between case studies, I think. So I think there's things you can start doing and start building a plan of what each week's going to look like. So something I did was I created headings for each section of the plan. So as I was working through, and I was thinking, I know I'm in the protection section, but actually I really have just had this thought about estate planning or retirement planning. You can put it in to the case study as like a draft. And then as you work through it, you're like, okay, yeah, I've ticked that off. Rather than all these ideas floating around in your head, just get them down on paper in one place.
Yeah.
So that you can focus get them out somewhere and focus on the section you're on and do it a bit more methodically. So that was something that really helped.
And I think that probably helps you sleep a little bit better at night as well, doesn't it? Because you're not trying to hold it all in your head. Although, tell me, were you fed up of these clients by the time you get to the end of the case study?
Oh, I was really fed up. And actually, when I found out I passed, I went back and reread my case study. And I was like, wow, I've really blocked out a lot of this. Maybe it was, blocking out the pain. But yeah, you do get quite fed up by the end. You feel like you really know them.
Yeah, absolutely. Tear up that case study, throw it in the bin.
Yeah.
Now you've passed. Onwards and upwards. Excellent. Well, Hetty, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm sure that all of our listeners are going to be really pleased to have heard all about your journey to become a certified financial planner. And thanks again for joining me today.
That's okay. Thank you for having me.
It's really interesting, isn't it, to listen to different people who have different experiences of gaining their certified financial planner certification, or maybe developing the financial planning profession at large. If you know anybody who you think might be interested in listening to any of these podcasts, then please do pass on our details. That's it for me. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. See you again soon. Bye for now.